Welcome, fellow wizards, to the Indie Game Lunch Hour. Today we're talking with Alessandro Biolo about the importance of commercialization in game development.
The Indie Game Lunch Hour.
In our live magical podcast, we give game devs the chance to hear stories of breaking in from industry experts, as well as directly ask them questions about their areas of expertise in the second half of each episode. This is a mostly unedited recording of a weekly event we host in our Discords Wednesdays at 12 p.m. Eastern Time, so feel free to swing by for the next one and ask your own questions live. I'm your host, as always, Willem Delventhal, headmaster of the Indie Game Academy, and the Purple Wizard, the Wizard of Joy. Joining me today is Alessandro Biolo. Alessandro has worked with us in a number of different ways. He is a senior business development manager over at Exola, where he is trying to increase the game development in LATAM countries. And he's also worked with us as a judge in a number of other ways at the Indie Game Academy. Alessandro, welcome to the show. So happy to be chatting with you. It's always a pleasure. What are you having for lunch today?
Good question. I don't know yet.
I don't think a single I think, like, if I had to give the odds, if we did like a statistical analysis, it'd be like 1 in 10 actually have an answer to that question. Most people say I'm sipping coffee.
Yeah, I was just sipping coffee a few minutes ago.
Amazing. I'm trying to cut back, but man, the brown bean juice is so delicious. It's hard.
Yeah. Well, especially down here in Latin America, we love our coffee. So,
how do you take your coffee? How about that? The first gripping question of the day.
You mean like hot or cold?
Yeah, hot, cold, milk, sugar.
No, straight black and hot.
I think that makes you. Yeah, I've heard that makes you more of a man. That's what I've been told.
Yeah, but when I was younger, I like it like really sweet with some milk. But then when I grew older, I kind of like I became too sweet, maybe somehow. So I started like avoiding sugar and the milk.
Gotcha. Yeah, these days I do black, but that's only because I just want to reduce the calories. Basically, I just like it's too easy to put on the pounds these days. Anyway, let's talk about game development a little bit. Alessandro, it's been great to get to know you and to work with you over the past couple of years. We had you in as a judge for one of our pitch contests a couple of years ago and just recently reconnected. And I feel like immediately it's been a wonderful connection almost immediately. I would love, though, where we always start on this show and where I think is most valuable to most of our listeners is just for that origin story. So, Alessandro, I would love to know how you got started in games and how you got to where you are today.
Okay, well, that's a long story, but I'll try to keep it as short as possible.
All right, you have 30 seconds. Just 30 kidding. Seconds. No, just kidding.
Okay, yeah, I used to work as an English teacher down here in Latin America, and my value proposition back in the day, I always thought about like value proposition. There were a lot of different academies in the country, so most of them teach you how to say pollito chicken, 1, 2, 3 ABCs and all that. But we were in a civil war back in the 80s, so we were getting like back in track in business and so on in the late 90s, early 2000s. So there were many American companies coming over to reestablish their businesses down here. So there was a lot of need for English back in those days in early 2000s. And I say, hey, something that people is not teaching is how to help workers with their business knowledge of the language, like how to answer a call, how to reply to an email, because that's the sort of thing that people really need. I mean, because like going over through the ABCs and the numbers and all that basic vocabulary, it helps, but it doesn't really help you on your daily activities. So I focused a lot on daily activities, on how to reply the email, how to work on a quotation. So those sort of things that were really relevant for the worker in their daily life. So I spent like that about maybe 12 years working with companies. And at some point I was doing really great. I had 40 teachers working with me.
Wow.
And yeah, and we were working with the top companies in the country, including brands like Coca-Cola and other top brands in the country. And back in those days, I had a very I would say very nice income coming every month. So I'm kind of a savings guy. So I was always like saving a little bit of like putting that 10 to 15% every month to keep it in the bank. And I say just in case. And then I say, okay, I have enough money and I would like to do something innovative. So I started bringing software. There is a very popular software in the US that is called Rosetta Stone. I don't know if you ever heard
Hmm.
about that brand.
Of
So
course.
yeah, so I became one of their distributors for for the Central American region. I had a
Hmm.
deal with them, and I like connected really well with this with the software in innovation. So then later on, I say, okay, what else could I do? What do I love? I love teaching, and I love video games. So that's when, wow, one thing took me to the other, and it was a game about wizards, by the way. My first game was called Battle of the Spells,
Hmm.
and spells also means like say the words like abracadabra, so spelling. So in Spanish, it has a double meaning. A spell is like when you cast the spell, that's a magical thing, but
Hmm.
also the spelling of the words. So I kind of like combine those two. And my idea, and why I'm bringing this to the conversation, my idea was okay to create this great game like and when I hear now developers pitching this idea, it backtracks me to those days. I used to say I want to make a Zelda to learn languages. So it was kind of
Hmm.
an RPG game where the enemies attacked you and you cast a spell on them. But in order to cast a spell, you have to pick the right word. So there was a
Hmm.
picture that said, "What is this in this picture?" And you said, "It's a tomato. It's number two, number three, whatever." So I put you a picture. It was like playing like Pictionary, sort of, and you cast a spell and you kill the enemies. So I was pretty excited with the project, and I said, okay, wow, this is an innovative game. Here in El Salvador, the video game industry, we don't even have an industry now. So back in early 2000s, it's like nobody was talking about making a video game to learn languages. When
Hmm.
I talk about this with other colleagues in the education industry, they were like, "What are you doing? A game to learn English? That's so weird." So I started with the project. I am not a developer, like a coder. I am not an artist, but I always been like really involved into educational topics and business topics. So I said, okay, this might be a good idea, and this might be something that the market really wants. But unfortunately, I was at that time I was more into the passion rather than into the really business side of things. So I
Hmm.
developed this game that I truly believe that I would become a millionaire with the game, and I put it in the market, and most of the things went wrong. So a lot of my conversation with you guys would go around that. So some years later, I decided to make a career move into video games,
Hmm.
and because I spot this weakness of studios in general across the Latin American region and even in the US and other regions, I
Hmm.
thought that there was this weakness in the business side of things, and that many of the developers are not really business wise and business oriented. So I said there is an opportunity here for some consultancy working as an agent and so on. So back in 2016, I made this career move, and I started working mostly as an investor and a business developer for studios. And
Hmm.
then Exola approached me like in 2018 for this project that I was telling you about. And give me a sec.
Oh. Oh.
Okay, so that was in back in 2016, 2017 that I started working with studios and helping them pitch their games and getting funding. Let's all go to the so in 2018, 2019, Exola approached me with this idea of selling games through our own channel and so on. And I said, wow, this really makes sense to me. I really like the idea and I like all the different things that they had. So I started collaborating with Exola. And since I was like in the industry in Latin America has been growing, I would say exponentially, like from the outsourcing side of things, since like early 2000s, and then when we moved into the 2010, 2020, it grew a lot. So I knew a lot of people in all the different countries in Argentina, Chile, Peru. I'm a very talkative person, as you can see. I'm sorry that I haven't given you the chance to
You're doing
talk.
great.
Yeah. So I started like making all these connections in the within the Latin American ecosystem and the U.S. ecosystem, because where we pitch our games was in the U.S., right? To get some funding opportunities and PAX and E3. The dead E3 was there, so I had a lot of connections between the two worlds. So Exola approached me back in 2021. Hey, Alessandro, we see that you have a good network of people. You have already introduced us to a lot of developers that now are partners as you are. Wouldn't you like to work for us as a consultant for a period of time? And I said, oh, wow, I like the idea. And they had this new internally, they have this new initiative of game ambassadors, they call that. They would be like brand ambassadors of Exola in different regions in Europe, in Latin America, and Asia. So it was like the perfect timing. And when they approached me and I said, okay, yeah, I like the idea. And then the pandemic came, and it was complicated to like connect with the developers and so on. And I was uh, like I said again, I'm very talkative. I know a lot of person, so it was like one email. Like sometimes it was like just one email, and they immediately reply, and Exola started talking with the developers. So like 6 months or 7 months later, they said, Alessandro, we have this full-time position open for Latin America. Would you like to join us as a full-time employee? And kind of like I would say spearheading the awareness of the company, while also collaborating with the developers in the region. And that's how I joined them back in 2022 full time. But I was like kind of like already working with them full time since I was a consultant. I am a little bit passionate about things that I do, so I was doing a little bit more than just working as a consultant for them. And then I've been working here at Exola for all that time. So that's kind of
Wow.
my career path now.
That's the story. That's incredible. I think, there's something that I think we can all there's a lot always. One of the reasons I love this show, there's always something that we can take away from these stories. And one of the things I want to take away here is most of our listeners are from the US, but we have listeners from across the world. And I just want to point out how the story is very similar no matter where you are in the world. You were working another job, you were outside of the game industry, you were like, that sounds interesting. You kind of experimented with it. I love that you released an educational game. I love too that you went, oh crap, my passion is not enough. I should have thought about commercialization. That's a realization indies have all over the world. Then you had a bit of a pause. You came back, and now you're here, like bringing games to your country, which is a story. Your countries, your region, and that's a story that I hear from a bunch of people, and is one of my favorite stories because I just want more people playing games because they're beautiful and wonderful. So
Yeah,
I love your story, Alessandro.
yeah, and there's also this, I mean, in Latin America, and I would say like all over the world, like indie developers are spearheading innovation, to be honest,
Yeah.
because you know that the AAA companies, and I don't want to talk trash about AAA companies by any means.
We can talk a little bit of trash, 10% trash.
But I mean, the ones that are really spearheading innovation in the gaming industry, it's us, it's indie developers. It's like
Yeah.
with my last game, it was a mix of a tower defense and a beat 'em up. So it was like mixing. Always said that we were trying to mix water and oil because tower defense is really slow pace. It's really like taking your time to put your turrets and so on. But we had this mobile turret that it was the main character that he went punching all over the place. So it was Plants vs Zombies meets Streets of Rage.
That's
So
awesome.
yeah, so when I pitched the idea, it was like to top companies, and they say, "Hey, wow, we never came up with this idea," and I said, "Yeah, because you're not in this."
I think I like the metaphor that indies are like the coral reef of a reef ecosystem, like the actual coral.
Yeah,
They're not they're not fancy. They're not the shark swimming through the water. But they're essentially the bedrock that the rest of the industry relies upon because they are where the innovation comes from. They're where the new genres get defined. We just had like Survivor likes become a thing. We have games like Lethal Company coming out, or freaking Pal World for that matter, that help define what games even are and what the meta of game development is, what games we're going to be playing, and what games AAA's are going to be releasing. So yeah, ultimately, whatever your metaphor is, I view indies as that bedrock. They're what the rest grows upon.
yeah, definitely. It's like I love this game, Vampire Survivor.
Yeah,
The innovation, and when because I played that game for like hundreds of hours already. Like every
I
time I
did
get
too.
on a plane anywhere in the world, I am playing Vampire Survivors, and
Yep.
I'm like, wow, this guy did everything right. I mean,
Yeah.
he's a master of presenting game progression. I mean, he's perfect. It's amazing what he did, and
Yeah.
nobody have thought about it. So it's amazing, and with an art style that he purposely made it look bad so that people talk about it. So he's a genius. He's a genius, and
Yeah.
this is the
Yeah.
sort of things that I think that when you are under corporate establishment is very complicated to do.
Hmm. I 100% agree. So you had that moment in your own career where you released a game for passion. You were like, I'm going to build something amazing and the money will come. And then, as many indie developers realize, that didn't quite work out. The money didn't quite come. I, in fact, did the exact same thing with Tailmore that I talk about now and then. Loved the game, a lot of passion, cool game, didn't make that much money. So you told us that the episode for today, the podcast topic for today, would be the importance of commercialization. I would love just your general intro there. Tell us what you mean by that. Tell us what we need to know.
Yeah. Okay. And I pull up my presentation here that I'm always very everywhere. And basically, the commercialization, it's a word that is not commonly used by game developers in general. And maybe like just like big corporate people think about this because commercialization is a word that can be misunderstood by many, and especially here like in Latin America, for us in Spanish, commercialization means the actual selling of the game, like that moment when you are in front of your customer selling a product. That's what we understand by that. But
Hmm.
what really commercialization is the process of converting a product in a product or a product concept into a profitable product. And but what I mean by that is that the commercialization process starts when the inception of the idea starts, when
Mm.
you are getting started with the concept. And this is something that I learned the hard way with my first game, with my second game, with my third game. Because the thing is that we had all these meetings that I'm pretty sure that you had in the past, and many of the guys that are here had in the past. You are talking about the game, about game mechanics, about the meta elements, and all that. But nobody in those rooms and in those sessions says, hey, but how are we going to sell this? Who is
Hmm.
going to be our target audience? Who is going to pay for this? How much are they going to pay for this? Will this be something that people will pay for? So, I mean, and listen, I'm talking about the word pay, because the actual commercialization is that moment that the monetization happens when you actually put the product into the hands of the person, but the commercialization process really started way before. So this is, and I take my first game as an example. I have this story that I told my wife back in the day. You know what? I'm one of the most innovative minds in the world. I am designing this game for learning languages. Who doesn't want to learn languages in the world? With the importance of English across the globe and so on. And video games. All the new generations want to play video games. So this would be a breakthrough. This was me back in 2010. Yes, like I know everything. So I came up with this idea and I told my wife, I'm brace yourself because I'm going to become a millionaire. And I don't know how in the world we are going to do with so much money. That's what I told her. And these are the not in English but in Spanish, but these are the exact words I used. So I started with, and back in 2010, the commercialization of the product, like the final stage of the process, not the early stage, was using physical goods. So I learned the hard way that it was so hard to put a line of production, to put my game into a CD and have the covers made. And I went through all that process of creating the CDs to burn. I purchased some CD burners back in the day, and I was burning CDs and putting the covers, and I was doing like I had my own production line, and I had to spend thousands of dollars to get the equipment, to get the materials, to have suppliers. So I thought about everything that had to do with the actual production of the video game and the physical part, because back in the day, the final commercialization stage, it was really involving to physical goods. So I put all the effort there, but I never thought about the point of sale, about the price points. I didn't think about the audience that will be buying and paying for this. So I started like selling the games, and I said, I back in those days, I have like 10,000 students in my academy. So it was like a big number of people, and I work with a lot of academies in the country. So I went to these places to showcase the game to the kids, because my first idea, my first theory was this is something that is very suitable for younger audiences. Be careful when sometimes you talk with developers and what's your target audience, and they say, I'm thinking about from 5 years old to 10 years old. And I said, that's a huge gap, especially for educational products, because the learning process, the learning curves of kids from age 5 to age 10 is huge. So I started showcasing the game, and all the kids hated it, and they no. And they let me know, we don't like this game, this is very boring, and so it was like very bad comments. And some of them said, we kind of like the art, because I had like great art with wizards and all that, and witches and stuff like this magical stuff. They kinda like it. So I said, okay, maybe this is the wrong audience, so I will pick another audience. I went to the teenagers. You know what happened with teenagers?
What'd they do?
They hated it even more.
Oh man.
And I was like trying to sell them the stuff, and they say, I wouldn't pay a penny for this, because this is not this is really boring. The art style is like for little kids. I'm not a kid. They were these people that are already playing like the console stuff or the PC stuff. So they were like, I'm not gonna play this. And I say, wow, they are not the audience. The problem is that I have 20,000, listen, 20,000 cases in my garage with a lot of material that I had to sell. And then I said, okay, let's see, I'm going to try a different audience. So there was a program here in El Salvador to incentivize new entrepreneurs in the country, especially the ones that were working with animation and video games and so on. So I got a grant from the government to make a new version of the game. So at that time, I said, okay, the new version should be a mobile version of the game. So I redesigned the game and I made it more suitable for mobile, and I put it in the Google Play Store and kind of like started ramping up. But I always got these messages. The audience changed. It was older audience. 20s to 30s, 35s, even some 40 age people there. And I was getting always these comments. We love the game, but we hate the art. This is not something that I would pay for because this is kind of like for kids. So what the message in the end? That the kids hated it, the younger
The
audience,
teens hated it.
and the ones that
And the adults hated it.
the ones that I thought that wouldn't like the game, they did like the game, but they didn't like what was behind the game, like all these characters and so on. So there I made a big mistake because I couldn't find my audience because I was doing something that I loved. You know, I'm a Generation X kid that played Zelda when it came out. So I said, I want to make this Zelda game. I'm very passionate about education. So I have to blend all this into a creation. But I never thought on how am I going to sell it? Who am I going to sell it to? So this is like I am telling you and breaking down the process of commercialization that I told you the is creating this concept into a profitable product. So that's the idea. Otherwise, I mean, you cannot keep up with your dream of making a next game and so on. And I made a lot of mistakes. So I kind of like break down the process into three phases. The first stage is the conceptualization and testing. But when I say testing, I'm not talking about testing bugs and testing glitches and testing all of these technical aspects of the game, but rather testing with the audiences. So try to find the right audience. Then the second process is the marketing, distribution, and monetization phase, but is the planning phase, not the last part that you see in the process. So what I recommend is in breaking down these is like when you have the product, you have some key questions that you must ask yourselves. And this is for the audience, for those developers that are just getting started with their first or second game. One of the key questions first is, who am I going to sell this game for? How much I'm going to sell this game for? Tough question. How am I going to sell it? And the last one, where am I going to sell it? So once you have these four questions answered somehow with some testing, because you need to really confirm that you are saying I'm going to sell it to this audience, but you need some sort of documentation data that really confirms your theory, right? And why are we going to do this? Because we need to take some key decisions afterwards. And I'm talking about the conceptualization phase. Look, I'm not talking about you haven't even developed a prototype in this point. Or maybe a small prototype, but there are some key decisions. The genre of the game, the platform, the technology, the funding, the publishing model. So when you have already answered those questions, you move to take the decisions, and then you create your first prototype, or you aim for a vertical slice. So when you are at that stage where you have thought out all these, but when I say thought out, I mean like you really have some sort of data or documentation that really tells you you are going into the right track, and only then you can start pitching your idea to investors and publishers looking for funding opportunities, or even if you are considering bootstrapping the whole project to self-publish. But you need to be certain of what your product is. And this is a very tough conversation with some developers, because they tell me, Alessandro, we are not making a product, we are making a game. And I say, yes. And there are some people that would disagree with me on game being a product, but in the end, at the end of the day, it's a product. But I'm not talking about this, and going back to the AAA ideas, I'm not talking about doing this milk cow that you are going to make. And you see where I'm going with this comment. Like, you are not thinking about a like getting this product in the market that you will keep monetizing over this idea to the people, and not thinking about the innovation aspect of the game, or about the mechanics of the game, or delivering something that really the game industry wants and needs. I'm talking about a basic product. I mean, a basic product mindset that you need to have in order to get what you want, which is keep dreaming about making a great game.
Continue to make new games past this as well to be able to keep yourself sustainable and make the money you need.
Exactly, because otherwise your dream will end sooner rather than later. Because,
And you'll have 20,000 DVDs sitting in your garage.
you know, and this is a true story. I had these 20,000 plus DVDs in my garage, and with other, because I also made some trading cards that combine with the game, like sort of Magic the Gathering meets Zelda. Imagine
Okay.
all the things that I did. And I had all these big boxes with the cards there. I threw them away a year before last, after about 10 years of having them there, because every time I got into my garage with my car, I thought about my mistakes.
Wow.
So I left, and my wife was, no, throw them away. You already learned. She said, I still need these reminders. So I have those boxes as a reminders of what you shouldn't do.
Amazing. So I want to clarify first. You said that there's these 3 steps that you do. The first step was conceptualization and testing. What are the second 2 steps?
The second 2 steps is the part of where you take the key uh, key conclusions. You take some decisions, like what platform are you going to use for the game, if you're going to do self-publishing, what if you don't get a publisher. So you need to sort out everything. I always advise developers, work as if you were never going to be published by a publisher. Even if that's your main goal or priority in your strategy. Because if you don't think it that way, you wouldn't be able to sell this idea to somebody else. And I know that many developers will disagree with me on this one, but great games don't sell themselves.
They really don't.
Not,
I the story that you experienced of thinking that you have the most brilliant game in the universe and that you're the new mind of a generation. I've been through that, and so many of my friends who are game developers have been through that, and so many devs have been through that because it's really easy to live in the fantasy of I know this game is amazing, and so everybody else will know this game is amazing. And unfortunately, that's just not how it works. Because we're bombarded with games and content and everything, and so of course we're not going to think that your game is amazing as you do. And so, like, I've heard we had a marketer on here a long time ago where he said about half of your game is the marketing. And I think it's arguable exactly what percentage it is, but it's very true. No matter how wonderful your game is, it can absolutely flop if it is not commercialized and marketed well.
Yeah, and I don't want to call names here, but there are some big triple A titles out there. And when you go and learn about their production budgets, you will be amazed that about 55 to 60% of the budget goes to marketing. And I would say goes to commercialization because they start planning all these phases way, way in advance. It's not something like, because this is what I want to make like crystal clear on the term commercialization. We think that commercialization is that stage when I start the monetization and the selling of the game. No, this is not commercialization. Commercialization starts in that ideation phase. Then it goes when you take the key decisions, then when you actually prototype and start testing. Because when you have a real product to test to the audience, the audience doesn't really like, and you cannot find the right audience for your game. Unfortunately, this is the time where you have to take a decision to move away from the project and drop it completely, or keep on dreaming on the project. But the problem is that the only people that tells how great the game is yourself. I've been there. I've been there. You know what I used to do when the last project I implemented all these things in the last friend, and we did kind of decent for an indie game from Latin America. One of the things that I did during trade shows was asking for feedback on the game. And look, this is maybe a tip that maybe you do it or maybe you never heard of. I never ask people and never ever ask people, did you like the game? I asked them, can you tell me something that you didn't like about the game? And did you spot any issues with the game? And I used to tell them, I am not a developer, so you can express yourself freely. And people start giving me bad feedback. For me, and this could be quoted if you want, bad feedback makes for great feedback of your game.
Yes. All feedback is good feedback. You want people to tear it apart. And and it's okay. When people don't like your games, they're doing you a favor.
Definitely. They are doing you a favor. And you know that when I had all this bad feedback, I used to bring the bad feedback to some of the studios that I worked with back in the day. And many of them got a little frustrated because I always came with the bad feedback and not with the good motivational feedback, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And I told them, I'm getting you the best feedback that we can get.
I love that.
What we are doing wrong and what we have to work on the hardest to put more passion into it. So I always recommend developers go put your game in front of your girlfriend, your wife, your friends, and please ask them, give me bad feedback. I don't want to hear good feedback because I mean people don't want to hurt your feelings, right?
Yes. It is your bad feedback is your metaphorical 20,000 DVDs in your garage. It's how you learn.
That's right. Because if I had gotten that bad feedback back when I was ideating everything and I was prototyping the project, I think many things would have changed. And I have the perfect example here. Right next door is Guatemala. I live in El Salvador. In Guatemala, there was this smart guy that created Duolingo. I don't know if you ever heard about Duolingo. It was created in Latin America. Duolingo was created in Latin America. And this guy really nailed it because he created this product that people call a game, but really it's not a game. It's a gamified app. That's
Mm-hmm.
what Duolingo is. But people feel it like it's a game. If I had understood what the audience in mobile wanted to learn languages, I think that I would be giving this speech to you from my jack in.
You would be the millionaire playboy that you were thinking of. Here,
Yeah.
so I want to make sure I have this. So we've got step one, conceptualization and testing. Step two, I've labeled this as answer key questions: the who, how much, how, and where. And then what is that step three?
The step one, if you want to go back, is answering the questions like who to sell it to, how much
Okay.
to sell it to, how to sell it, which is a very important question there, and where to sell it.
Mm-hmm.
After all those questions have been sorted out and figured out, and you have a clear answers to those questions, you move to the decision phase where before prototyping, I'm talking about before prototyping, like the actual vertical slice that you would work on, and
Mm-hmm.
you can take some key decisions like the genre of the game, what platforms, what technology, what the the funding would be for this game or what the budget would look like and the publishing model that you will be using. You need
Mm-hmm.
to figure out all these before even starting your prototyping the vertical slice, because these things will brutally impact the business side of your game, because when you have everything sorted out as a product and you have created these, because these are, we are not in the second phase that I told you the process, which is working on the strategy, the business, the actual business strategy and the marketing strategy of the game. At this phase, you can really tell what to aim for. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking for this type of investor. I'm looking for this type of publisher. I'm looking for this type of partner, and etc. And the etceteras go going on. The clearer you have it, the easier. This is why I like this. And talking about the pitch night, these guys that presented Ratsurrection. I don't know if there are any Ratsurrection guys here in the in right now, but I really like it that they were thinking about to make a streamable game.
Mm-hmm.
So right there, I could see that they thought a lot about their audience. So this is
Mm-hmm.
why, in when we were discussing with the other judges, I told them I really like Resurrection because they really thought about the audience that I would like to use the word attacking, the
Mm-hmm.
audience that will Resurrection make sense to.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So once you deliver that product slash game, if you don't want to use the word product, when you can actually deliver that product to that specific audience, amazing things can happen, my friend.
Mm-hmm. I love that.
Amazing things.
So I'm trying to define this down to like three easy statements for people to remember for your three steps. So it sounds like step one is answer those key questions. Step two is maybe like strategize and target. Is that how you would maybe define it?
Yep.
And then step three is the conceptualization and testing. So you're answering those questions, you're strategizing, you're saying who this is for before ever even coming up with a concept.
Exactly. So you have
Amazing.
a basic concept, and then you start. Okay, who's gonna play this game?
Mm-hmm.
Who's going to because the problem that I found, not only me working as a game producer slash
Mm-hmm.
game designer, but seeing it in other teams as well, is that people want to start creating games that make sense to them.
Right.
It's okay, which is
Yeah.
okay. I'm not against that. But you really not need to find who is going to like that creation and who is going to pay for that creation. And I'm not a materialistic person that doesn't care about innovation and all that. It's a matter of reality, right? Okay, you have this reality where if you don't make ends meet, you cannot keep with your dream of making more games.
Yeah. Yep. Simple fact. Well, we are. I want to make sure we have time for at least a couple of community questions. So I pulled Rick up on stage. Rick is our chief question asker. That is his official title. We're going to make you a hat, Rick, maybe. Rick, would you like to start us off with a community question for Alessandro?
Yeah, so I really like the part earlier where we were talking about indies being the bedrock of innovation, but you're also talking about commercialization and how do you kind of prove that you have a really strong commercial case for your game. So when you're working on something that's innovative and perhaps hasn't been proven before, how do you prove that you're on the right track with a project?
Very easy. Very easy, but difficult question at the same time. People will love it. The audience that you are aiming for will love that game. It's like when I heard my son is right here with me, and he told me about Vampire Survivor. And I heard a lot about this game, and I'm not a mobile gamer. I play mostly on consoles. When I played the game for the first time, I mean, I couldn't put it away. And I was like, wow, this guy was offering that you can actually play your game with your thumb, and that's all you needed, and he delivered it, and it's fun at the same time. So with what I meant with the three phases is first phase, you ask these questions, and I'm talking about an innovative product or any product that you are working on. You make the questions, then you strategize on those questions. Okay, these are the key decisions that I would be taking based on these criteria that I had, and then you create the actual prototype, and then you go out there and test it. So this testing will let you know what you have in your hands. I don't know if that answers the question, Rick.
Yeah, it definitely does. I do wonder like what the right process of doing the testing is to like figure out, okay, you've got this product, how do you get that feedback at all?
Yeah, well, one of like what I would recommend is like obviously with the audience is having people to play the game. So have a lot of play testing sessions with different types of players, different types of people. Try to gather as much feedback as you can. Uh, then it would be also pitching to professionals in the industry, showing them your game, and they would immediately tell you if you are going into the right direction or not. I know a Mexican guy that he says this game has patas en cola. So that means this game has tail and legs. This dog, we say, this dog has tails and legs. I don't know how you guys say that saying in English.
I have no
It is
idea.
different.
But it means that you have something good in your hands.
It's
Uh,
got legs, actually. Yeah, we do say that.
industry professionals, like we have this legend working at Exola. His name is Justin Berenbaum. He's running our funding club, and that guy has seen so many games in his life. 40 years of career. So can you go and feel an ex Activision Blizzard, how many projects this guy has seen? And if you ask for honest feedback, and by honest feedback is don't tell me how much you like the game, tell me how much you hate my game, tell me the bad things about my game. And if he cannot actually tell you this game is really bad, I was going to say about bad expression there. So if he says your game is really bad, these are the sort of feedback that you get. If he cannot actually tell you what's wrong with your game, you could say, wow, I think I have something good in my hand, something that has legs and tail.
Great
So
advice.
I
Thank you.
would say put it in front of as many people as you can, because in the end of the day, who's going to play the game? A human, a person.
Hmm. Yeah, I think I want to tack onto this one because the like innovation versus confirming that a game has legs is one of the ones that I see a lot in our students where they're like, well, I want to be innovative. I shouldn't be like testing against existing markets or whatever. But I think like that's a distinction that doesn't actually exist. You can be innovative. Like if the guy who made Vampire Survivors had tested an early version of that or even had tested just like concept work, I would hazard a guess that the testing would have gone well even when that game wasn't created yet, didn't exist yet. So there is no distinction between innovation and like creating a strong product. Innovation just means we're doing a different product, but that's still testable and provable. That hasn't changed.
Yeah, and I heard this. I read somewhere the story about Call of Duty Zombies. I love Call of Duty Zombies. I played them like every single weekend of my life, and this was not an actual game component or DLC of War at War back in the day. It was like the developers were goofing around and they say, hey, you know what, we did this game with zombies and it goes in waves and it's pretty fun, and they start playing it among themselves and they say, hey, we have something with legs and tail here. Why
Yes.
don't we? And you know what, just take these are the things that we gotta like take a look at what the big companies are doing. They didn't full release a full zombies game because they were Activision. I mean, Activision can do whatever they want. They have all the money in the world to launch a game. And they said, no, let's put it as a prototype in World at War and see how it goes.
And then it went well.
Really well. But
Yeah.
they didn't make a full version of the game because really, at a corporate level, from what I understand, they saw it with legs and tail, but it really didn't make sense for. I mean, it was a world war game, and what does this have to do with Nazi zombies, and all that? So it didn't
Hmm.
like make sense. But they tested it. You see the prototype there. That's a
Hmm.
prototype. The first Call of Duty Zombies slash deal. Yeah, it was only a map. It was I don't know, Knack der Toten or something like that. That was a prototype, and they tested out. So
Amazing. I love
that's
it.
that's kind of the things that we as indie developers must take a closer look at it.
Hmm. Awesome. All right, we've got like one more question, I think. Petunia, we've got plenty more questions. We've got time for one more question. Petunia is up on stage. Petunia, would you like to ask your question of Alessandro?
Hey, hi. How was the game market in El Salvador back then? And was there any reference that you took into account before releasing the game that you mentioned early on, the one with the 20,000 copies?
Well, there was nothing, and I didn't really care about anything that had to do with marketing. Just, I mean, I had this mind that I had to create this product, and once that I have this great product and put it in front of the audience, it would just go away and people would get it. That was my
Okay.
idea when I released my first game. So there was not anything that I could say. I did well with the software, with the Rosetta Stone software that I was distributing in the country. So I thought, okay, if I have a proven concept of this software working in the market, this will work even better. That was my theory, but I didn't test anything.
Has there been any other releases in the Salvador market, in the gaming market there, through the years that you've seen?
Yes, but not locally. We went more internationally. Is There are some small teams that work on some games and they release it, but always the problem was that last part of having the actual sales and then becoming sustainable. And this is why you see all across Latin America, we have a big issue because there are not many big titles coming from the region, And it's not because we don't have the talent or the innovation, but rather because we don't understand how to actually put those games in the market. So there are a lot of studios that are doing outsourcing services. I
Oh,
mean,
gotcha.
I work with a team in Recife in Brazil, Coco Studios, huge studio, 300 plus people. They did Horizon West for Guerrilla Studio. So these are the type of projects that they work on. So they have the talent. They cannot really work in their own titles.
Oh,
And that has a lot to do with that commercialization part, which is not really well developed in the region as a whole, not only in El Salvador. I wouldn't talk about El Salvador because it's such a small country and we don't really have an industry here. I will talk about the Latin American region as a whole.
yeah.
I've seen the same thing in other basically just non-US game development studios. The converting basically American games to their local area is one of the biggest things they seem to do to keep the cash flow coming in. And it's less common for them to be working on independent IP, which is a little sad, but hopefully we'll get there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and something that and I talked this with the guys that back in the day we were colonized by Spain and other countries, Latin America, and the thing is that we learn how to grow the banana, how to put the banana in the box, and then let the American or the European guy or the Asian guy in this case sell the banana for you. How much are you making per banana? Almost nothing. So I tell the developers, we need to learn that next stage. In that
To sell the banana.
I sell the banana, exactly. And they say, yes, Alessandro, that's commercialization. And I said, no, commercialization starts when you grow the banana and put it in the box. That's where it starts.
Well, now that you mention it, and I'm sorry for taking out so many questions and stuff,
No, go
but
ahead, go ahead.
it's interesting that the Godot engine started in Argentina and was run mostly from Argentina for a long time. And I think they moved to Spain, as far as I know. Like they're just not continuing in Argentina because the main guy, Juan, he's an Argentinian guy.
Yeah, most of the top team in the corporate team in Godot is from Argentina. I know them, and one of the difficulties that we have as a region, and I face this issue. There are many American and European companies that wouldn't invest in Latin American companies because
Gotcha.
of the legal issues, the corruption issues, and all that. As a matter of fact, I had an offering from a publisher to move the studio to Costa Rica because Costa Rica is a little bit more stable than other countries. And he said, I cannot, I have the money for your studio, Alessandro, but I cannot invest in El Salvador because there is like a list. I wouldn't call sanctioned countries, but I would say countries that are too risky to invest in. So
Oh,
unfortunately, there and Argentina with all those issues with the Argentinian peso and all that, it's pretty clear why they didn't continue in Argentina with Godot.
yeah, gotcha. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks so much.
Amazing. All right, so we are at the end of the episode for sure. Before we say goodbye, though, Alessandro, one of the things we like to do here is assign some homework. So I'd love to hear from you something that the audience can do in the next week. That's going to take them just about an hour or so. That can help them practice some of what we talked about here.
Yeah, there are so many homework that we could do, but I would say that you can pick a game, a triple A title or a mid tier title or any title that you want, and try to figure out the commercialization strategy of that game, how they started prototyping the game. There is information there. I love Gamma Sutra. That now it's not Gamma Sutra. Is what's it called now?
It's just called Game Developer now, which is a little sad to me. Very
Yeah,
generic.
because it sounded very better, Gamma Sutra. So
Yeah.
there's tons of information about games there, and if you go to the business section, you will find all these great commercialization topics that most of the time I know developers just take for granted. So my homework would be pick a game and try to figure out the commercialization process that they followed, and you
Amazing.
will learn a lot.
Fantastic. Okay, so do your homework in the next week. You've got an hour. Pick a game, any game, and write out the commercialization strategy of that game. The who, how much, how, and where of that game. And then tag us at the Indie Game Academy, perhaps tag Alessandro Biolo, and we'll tell you what we think. Before we say goodbye, Alessandro, is there anything that you would like to say here at the end, or anything that you would like to plug?
Well, it was a pleasure speaking with you. And I can only be passionate about what I do, and try to put a little bit of your passion on game creation towards a little bit to the marketing and business side of things. There are many things that can change. So that would be like my recommendation. Don't take for granted that part that shouldn't be taken for granted. We have to be outsmart the big guys if we want to be big.
Absolutely. I want to see more indies make more money and outsmart the big guys, and I think Alessandro does too. Let's do it all day. Don't forget your 3 steps of commercialization. Your answer those key questions, strategize and target, and then conceptualize and test. Basically, I think we can boil this all down to actually have the commercialization figured out before you're even testing a prototype. I've had a wonderful time talking with you today, Alessandro. Thank you for being here. Thank you for answering these questions. Thank you to those who asked questions, and thank you to listeners. As always, if you enjoyed, we ask that you send this along to just one other person that you think may enjoy the episode. And we'll be here again next week, 12 p.m. Eastern Time. Thank you, everybody.